Three of the world's most powerful financial figures, Timothy Geithner, Larry Summers, and Hank Paulson, stood before a room of 300 elite business leaders discussing their handling of the 2008 financial crisis. In that room, only one person stood up to challenge them face to face about their actions. That person is our guest today, Lawrence Lepard. Larry, what compelled you to stand alone against these financial titans in their own sanctuary?
Well, as my wife would say, it's because I'm a whack job.
I could feel the weight of hundreds of angry stares. The air in the auditorium was thick with tension. I had shattered the unspoken code of compliance.
You know, it was really a gross event, okay? So it was 10 years after the 2008 bailouts were really a big crime, in my opinion. And, you know, these guys were doing a victory lap. They were really kind of chest thumping. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
About we did the right thing, and don't you guys all agree that we did the right thing? I mean, that was the nature of the presentation. And I'm actually kind of surprised they even asked the question because they opened themselves up. But maybe they were trying to think, oh, let's see if anybody here, you know, doesn't buy the shit, right? Doesn't buy the story. And sure enough, I was that guy. You know what I mean? As Preston Pish said, he said, I'm reading this part and I'm thinking to myself,
that's not easy, man. I mean,
no, he's thinking to myself, oh no, Larry, please don't. Please don't. Please don't. You guys are sitting there pounding yourself on the chest over something that you know, and I know they know that it was unethical and that it wasn't right. And what they wanted is they wanted somebody to challenge them, because then what happened is Geithner went into this big soliloquy on how what I was proposing was Old Testament justice of an eye for an eye, and that in the modern world that didn't make sense. Everyone ended up blind. We had to help the bankers, to help the system, to help the people, and that's horseshit. I mean, I haven't in the book. There's an alternative theory of what they could have done, and so I just said it, and you know, but it didn't go over very well at all. I got some really snide comments. I got a lot of, nasty feedback, etc. Having said that, you know, and there were 300 people in the room. Probably a half a dozen came up to me, like, you know, just quietly after, like, that fucking took balls. One guy came up, he said, you know, he was older than me, a lot older than me. He said, man, what you said was dead ass right.
Welcome back to another episode of Cypherpunk'd, where we explore money's history, crypto's future, and Web3's role in advancing human rights, freedom, and digital liberty. Today's guest is Lawrence Lepard, managing partner at Equity Management Associates and author of The Big Print. Larry is a vocal advocate for sound money principles and has been investing in gold, silver, and Bitcoin since the 2008 global financial crisis. Today, we're kicking off our special deep dive series on Larry's book, The Big Print, with our very first episode. We will explore Larry's personal journey toward monetary truth and understand the fundamental thesis that drives his work, that fixing the money is the key to fixing our world.
That's correct. Thank you for having me on, man.
Welcome, my friend. It's nice to have you here.
Yeah, good to be here. Enjoy your show.
So, why did you decide to write this book, Larry?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it is a lot of funny things kind of came together. And they say when you do things in life, sometimes you get tapped on the shoulder, you know, by some higher power. And I think that might have kind of occurred here. So a number of things happened in early 2024. One, I had a woman reach out to me and said, I've been following you on Twitter. You've got a lot of interesting things to say. Have you ever thought about writing a book? I never had thought about writing a book. And so she kind of planted the idea in my mind. And then and she wanted to help me ghostwrite it. And we worked together for a little while. And I decided that wasn't what I wanted to do, use a ghostwriter. I thought I'd just write it myself. But but she said something to me that really resonated with me. She said, you know, Larry, books can change the world. And I'm kind of like, whoa, that's powerful. And then I thought to myself, am I capable of writing a book that's good enough to change the world? And I still don't know the answer to that, but I thought I'd give it my best shot. And that fortuitous event where somebody suggested it to me, I didn't really think about it, coincided with, you know, as you know, last year we had a presidential election. And so early 2024, the election cycle was in full blare, you know, for that fall. And I was listening to, you know, blue team and red team fighting each other. And I just got so incredibly frustrated because they were talking about all kinds of things that didn't seem to be as important as the underlying issue that I believe to be the most important issue, which is the unsound monetary system, the Keynesian monetary system that we run under. And I thought to myself, you know, nobody's really saying anything about it. We had a presidential debate where neither side talked about the debt, the deficit, the money printing, all that just didn't even get mentioned.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow. You know, the biggest and most important issue in the country today, in my opinion, humbly, and I could be wrong, but in my opinion, the biggest and most important issue in the country today is not even being discussed. It's like, what's going on? You know, I'm living in an alternate universe. And so I thought, well, maybe if I write a book and scream loud enough about it and explain it to people in terms that they can understand, maybe that'll be a catalyst for future generations of sound money warriors, which, I consider everybody in the Bitcoin and gold world to be a sound money warrior. We're tired of this broken system. So that was kind of what did it. And then the other thing that kind of held me back for a while is I surveyed the other Bitcoin books and I looked out there and there's some really great Bitcoin books. And I relied heavily on them, by the way, and borrowed from them and give them credit for it. Particularly Safe's book, the Bitcoin Standard, Lynn's book, Broken Money.
Fantastic book.
Jeff's book, The Price of Tomorrow, Deflation, Why It's Important. And others, many others, Nick Baudia's books, et cetera. And I thought, well, do we really need another Bitcoin book, right? And then I remember I've given away a ton of Safe's books to friends, and the reaction I often got, people didn't read it; they bogged down in it. Great book. It's really intellectual. It's fantastic. It is the standard, literally, for books on this stuff. But I realize that the average American is not going to read a textbook about Austrian economics and Keynesianism and the broken monetary system. So I thought, if somebody ought to write a book that was engaging enough for people to read, that had some stories, and because people watch reality TV, people want stories, people want a narrative. I thought, well, maybe I could write a narrative because I've lived through this stuff for the last my whole career. Maybe I could write a narrative that would capture people, and so therefore they would actually read the book. And so that was my plan. Is I'm going to write the story as a narrative. I'm going to explain why the monetary system's broken. And that's the bad news. That's the first half of the book. As you know, the book's divided up into problem and solution. First half is the problem, and full explanation of how we got here. It took a lot of steps, many years. And then, of course, the second half is the solution, how we fix it, including a policy response and a presidential speech. And, it's not all bad news, folks. I mean, yes, things aren't right. Things are broken. People are suffering. But there is a helpful solution emerging, very helpful. And people need to be aware of that. And I don't think many people are aware of that either. So those things kind of came together to create the book.
What I like about it is that, and you kind of touched on this, where like the Bitcoin Standard is like a fantastic book, but like you kind of have to be interested in Bitcoin.
Right.
If you have no interest in Bitcoin, you're like, you're not, you know nothing about it. Like you're not just going to buy that book, right?
Right.
Whereas like your book is like, aside from the foreword by Max, it's like Bitcoin isn't even discussed until like
second half,
second half of the book, right? So it's like all this other stuff, this history of what's happening, what's going on, ways to look at the world, stories about stuff that's happened. It's extremely engaging. It kind of pulls you in, and then it says, "Hey, here's the solution." Right? Here's a big part of the solution.
Exactly. I mean, you're getting screwed. I mean, the system is set up to screw the average person. And that's depressing. Let's face it. I mean, things are really broken. My 20-year-old kids can't buy houses. I mean, we all go to the grocery store. It's a nightmare.
Man, I was on the plane. I've been traveling a lot, and I told you I'm running on 2 hours of sleep right now. I'm just getting back. But when I was on the plane, I was having a conversation with one of my guys who was with me, and like he's looking to buy a house, but like I bought my house like 7-8 years ago. Like I bought a house, and like it's like tripled in value, but like has it really tripled in value? And like I'm like, my house now is worth like 3 times, and we're talking million plus dollars. It's like I paid like 1/3 of what it's worth. And
and not only that, but you were lucky, and
I was lucky
with low interest rates.
I got I'm at like 2.15%.
Exactly.
So like I pinged the bottom, right? I refied the bottom. I'm
right.
Like, this is funny. This
I believe
crazy.
The 30-year mortgage rate today is close to 7. It's in the 6s.
Yeah.
So and it makes housing unaffordable for young people. It's terribly sad.
I'm lucky that I know so many people that like have families that are like renting. Like it's like I've built this equity, and like it's a lot of it is because of the money printing. People are the whole we can dive down.
You were fortunate.
I was fortunate to be in
that you were able to buy. And by the way, housing is the one. I mean, the way, and we're going to go into this obviously, but the way that the wealthy have taken advantage of the more average people is that they have access to cheap credit. Average people have to pay 25% to the credit card companies. If you're somewhat better off, you can at least get a mortgage. And there was a time when you could get them at 3%. And so that was the one way that you could kind of get ahead.
Yeah.
But even that's gone away because interest rates are higher now.
Yeah, it's wild. Extremely wild once you really start unpacking it. And you've got so many great charts and graphs and stuff in the book. So there's a reason, like, read that book. It's fantastic.
Oh,
and
thank you, Rick.
then after you read the book, come back and listen to our podcast series about it to unpack all these things.
Yeah.
You know, because in the book are charts and graphs and visual things, and just like kind of Safe did in the Bitcoin Standard.
Yeah.
You've got the same kind of thing where you can really visualize the problem and really see when certain events occur, right?
Well,
It's like what the fuck happened in 1971 is a big part of it, and you just like see
yeah.
this
I mean,
stuff just like go parabolically crazy.
and I've been told that by people who've read the book. They're like, oh my God, I had no idea that this was true. You know, like the chart that's most depressing in there is that top 1% of the country owns 92% of the wealth. I mean, that's not a democracy. That's not a
Yeah.
middle class. That's an oligarchy, you know, where the people who are in power and have, you know, access to the cheap credit can take advantage of everybody else. And so it's just, it's incredibly unfair. And as I say, that's depressing, but what's exciting, what's positive is that there's a solution emerging, and it's going to change. I mean, you know, what's the phrase we all use? Nature is healing, right?
Nature is healing, yeah.
We're going to fix it.
Have you seen that? I got to frame this and put this up, but it's like it's a Bitcoiner said, if I have to pay a boomer 100 times what he paid for his house, he's
Yes,
going to pay me 1,000 times what I paid for my Bitcoin.
That's about right. That's exactly what's going to happen. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Made me laugh.
There's going to be a huge shift. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's dive in here. Let's dive right into the forward. And, you know, we're not going to talk about Bitcoin much for the first couple episodes of this series, but something that Max Kaiser wrote that was like I loved, and I kind of highlighted to kick it off.
Yeah.
And he did the forward of your book. He wrote, "Bitcoin is the North Star of money. Everything going on in finance today is either aligned or misaligned with Bitcoin. You are either moving closer to Bitcoin or moving away. The way to move closer is to stack harder. Larry Fink of BlackRock knows it. Michael Saylor of MicroStrategy knows it. Paul Tudor Jones, the hedge fund wizard, knows it. Great news. Once you own Bitcoin, all these people now work for you."
I know. I love that. I do too. You know, Max was so kind to write that forward. I saw him at a conference in the Middle East, and I gave him a draft of the book. I said, hey, if you like this, you know, anything you do. And he said, hey, I'll write you forward. I was like, thank God. I mean, because he's truly the original OG in the space. And I'm, you know, I'll forever be grateful for Max for him writing that.
All right, let's dive in here. So you dedicated this book to your father.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, yeah. So it's pretty personal, but my father died young. He died at 73 from cancer. And, you know, if I kind of look at who I am today, I think we're all a product of our environment and the people who raise us. And so, you know, most particularly, my father just had an enormous influence on me. He was a very honorable, ethical guy, worked hard his whole life, super smart, and was just, he really believed in a fair playing field. If I had to define one thing about him, I would say he was deeply concerned about fairness for everybody. And I think that really aligns nicely with the founding documents of America. You know, it's, we're created equal in terms of our rights, not necessarily equal in terms of outcomes. Some are more talented than others. I think everybody accepts that. But I think what most Americans want, and I think what made this country great, and I think the ideal of America is a level playing field, right? And that's what, you know, made this country, you know, a world leader in 1946, which is kind of when I begin to mark the beginning of the decline. And it hasn't been a decline, but been slippage off of the idea. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of things that the country did between its founding in 46 that are not admirable. But having said that, you know, we were a great country, still are a great country, but we've really lost our way, in my view, because the system has gotten more unfair. And I think that's, you know, if you look at all the political anger that we see today, you know, and it started, as we discussed earlier, it started with Occupy Wall Street, you know, when they bailed out the bankers in 2008, that was the beginning of a really bad crime. I mean, there were crimes before that, but that was a bad one. And, you know, the Occupy Wall Street movement came as a result of the fact that 95% of the country, they were like, hey, what's this all about? You know, you mean we got to lose our houses, lose our jobs, have a bad economy? And these guys who did it, who made this whole credit bubble happen, they get bailed out and they get $20 billion in bonuses. You know, that's not right.
Have you ever seen the meme where it's like everyone's outside with the Occupy Wall Street signs and there's like the banker sitting in his office. He's like, hurry up, distract them with identity politics or something.
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh, it's a great one.
But that makes sense.
It's like,
right? That's exactly what they did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just they got everybody calmed down.
Yep.
Like, it's all going to be fine. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just classic, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think it is by design. What you're describing is like, here's the real elephant in the room, and everybody, the conversation is over here about like, what color did you paint your toenails? And meanwhile,
right. Yeah. Yeah. What pronouns are you using?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's nuts.
It really is like, you really have to take that orange pill and that red pill, you know what I mean? Like step outside the matrix, right? To really understand, okay, what's happening. And I think once you do, I think your book is a really good example of shattering that matrix for people once they really dive down and understand all these things. It's like, oh my God, this is so obvious, right? It's like,
it is.
It was like,
to those of us who've been in it, it seems extremely obvious, but to be fair to our fellow citizens, they've been gaslit in a really, really big way, and I always amazed. I see Jerome Powell doing his press conferences, and I always listen, just, we are doing this on behalf of what's in the best interest of the American people. And I want to just throw tomatoes at the TV and scream bullshit. You're doing it what's in the best interest of the bankers, period, full stop. And we all know that. And, but I mean, but here's the thing. All of those illusions are starting to get broken, right? Yeah. I mean, COVID is a perfect example, right? I mean, everybody bought in, not everybody, some of us didn't, but many people bought into the narrative. But now it's been proven that the narrative was wrong, and we were gaslit throughout the whole thing. And so, I mean, there's another chart in the book that shows, I mean, what percentage of the people trust the government? It's down.
It's like down to nothing.
It's down to like 15 or 20%.
The media, the government is like, it's.
Yeah. I mean, it's so.
Trust has been broken and lost.
Totally. And the part of the reason, and the book talks about this as well, is that that's all occurred, and which I think saved us in a big way. Two things have saved us. The internet saved us in terms of information, right? I mean, it used to be what the New York Times said, that was just truth.
That was reality.
That was reality. That was truth. You had to accept it. Or what the three major networks said. That was truth and reality. And then, of course, you had the cable networks. But, now with the internet and with all these alternative voices of truth, being broadcast, I mean, Tucker and Joe Rogan and, podcasts like yours, I mean, just all these things, you can get honest information, and people can make their own choice.
Make their own choices
as to who's different. Yeah, as to who's telling them the truth. And, okay, maybe that's not the truth, but I'm going to listen to the alternative view. And so that, I think, is really changing things, and in a positive manner. And, eventually these old sclerotic institutions and, big things like the government and the networks and, the people in power who have been gaslighting us, they're going to fail. They're just going to fail because nobody's going to believe them anymore.
I think that's already, I mean, you're really seeing
they're failing.
They're failing. Right. I mean, it's like, I think CNN in primetime has less than like 500,000 viewers or something.
I know the numbers are terrible,
kind
right?
of insane. I mean, it's
Yeah. I mean, and it's, I kind of, there's a good parallel. I mean, I remember watching the Soviet Union fail in '89, and most of the Soviets knew that TASS was lying to them. You know what I mean? I mean, this was not like a revelation. They all kind of were smart, but eventually the whole thing just kind of disintegrated because they couldn't keep the lie going any longer.
Yeah,
and I think there's a similar thing taking place here.
Interesting. Yeah, you speak of the Soviet Union. I spoke to some Russians that lived through that, like through a lot of that, and they kind of just said like, they just knew that it was all lies, but it was kind of like you just kind of like grin.
What could you do?
A very sad like cultural reflection of their civilization, which was like everybody. It's like that we know that you're lying. That we know that you're lying. It's like, but you just grin and bear.
We keep on lying. Well, there wasn't necessarily an easy exit until eventually kind of one presented itself. And
yeah. Well, I think your dad would be proud of you. I think you wrote a fantastic book.
I appreciate that.
I think he would be very proud of you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Before we dive in here, let me share this remarkable story to tee us off here.
Okay.
In 2013, at Harvard Business School, three of the world's...
2018.
Oh, it's 2018.
Yeah,
okay,
2018. Okay. Yeah, that's good.
2018. All right. At 2018, I misread. The 3 is an 8. Or the 8 is 3. Three of the world's most powerful financial figures, Timothy Geithner, Larry Summers, and Hank Paulson, stood before a room of 300 elite business leaders, discussing their handling of the 2008 financial crisis. In that room, only one person stood up to challenge them face to face about their actions. That person is our guest today, Lawrence Lepard. Larry, what compelled you to stand alone against these financial titans in their own sanctuary?
Well, as my wife would say, it's because I'm a whack job.
What you said in the book here, I could feel the weight of hundreds of angry stares. The air in the auditorium was thick with tension. I had shattered the unspoken code of compliance.
Exactly. Well, it was really a gross event. Okay. So it was 10 years after the 2008 bailouts were really a big crime, in my opinion. And they occurred, and they kicked off the fourth turning. We'll talk about what that is later. But, these guys were doing a victory lap, right? They'd come back to, Paulson had gone to Harvard Business School and Summers was a professor at Harvard, so on. And they'd come back to kind of talk about to all the Harvard Business School people about how what they did in 2008 was courageous and honorable, and they saved the system. And they were really kind of chest thumping. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
About we did the right thing, and don't you guys all agree that we did the right thing? I mean, that was the nature of the presentation. And I'm actually kind of surprised they even asked the question because they opened themselves up. But maybe they were trying to think, oh, let's see if anybody here, doesn't buy the shit, right? Doesn't buy the story. And sure enough, I was that guy. You know what I mean? As Preston Pish said, he said, I'm reading this part and I'm thinking to myself,
that's not easy, man. I mean,
I was thinking to myself, oh no, Larry, please don't. Please don't. Yeah. And I just couldn't help myself. I was just like, this is total fucking bullshit. You guys are sitting there pounding yourself on the chest over something that and I know they know that it was unethical and that it wasn't right. And what they wanted is they wanted somebody to challenge them, because then what happened is Geithner went into this big soliloquy on how what I was proposing was Old Testament justice of an eye for an eye, and that in the modern world that didn't make sense. Everyone ended up blind. We had to help the bankers, to help the system, to help the people. And that's horseshit. I mean, I have in the book, there's an alternative theory of what they could have done. Mm-hmm. But the point is that, yeah, I don't know. It was hard and it wasn't, because I just, it was so obvious to me what was going on. And it was so obvious to me that somebody needed to say what I said. And so I just said it. And, but it didn't go over very well at all. I mean, like I got some really snide comments. I got a lot of, nasty feedback, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Having said that, and there were 300 people in the room, probably a half a dozen came up to me like, just quietly after, like, that fucking took balls. These are our business, one guy came up, he said, he was older than me, a lot older than me. He said, man, what you said was dead ass right. I mean, he used my words. I mean, what you said was completely right, and bravo to you for saying it. So some of us knew,
It's honestly, it goes so much deeper. It's like this, and it carries over to everything in society right now. If you really look at the culture of America, it's like a total lack of accountability. It's always like what he's saying, what Geithner responded with was like, hey, nobody's really accountable here. Nobody has to actually pay the consequences of their actions.
Right.
Like that's the argument of what he's essentially saying, right?
Right. Right.
Let's
it just circumstances overwhelmed us, and what we did was the best we could do. But
privatize the profits and socialize the losses.
So exactly. And
moral hazard to such a level.
And by the way, I didn't get, they didn't allow me any follow-up. They shut me down very quickly.
I can imagine.
Yeah, right. But my point, I guess, is that they knew. I know they knew, right? And that's why, again, I wrote the book. I sent the book to I haven't sent it to Summers yet. I haven't sent it to Paulson, but I sent it to other people that were there. And, they know. They definitely know, and somebody's got to call them on it. And so, call me the somebody. I'm the little kid saying the emperor's naked.
Let's dive into the preface of your book.
Okay.
This book is written because the system has been set up and controlled by a so-called elite group of financial and government people who don't care about you or your well-being. They have tilted the game board in their favor. This has led to the record wealth inequality we experience today, causing problems at all levels of our society. The system is broken because the money is broken.
Right.
So I think they get away with it because nobody understands what's happening. Nobody can really see. The consequences are obfuscated and hidden away. And sadly, the worst part of it is it's the fucking poorest people, like the lowest income people, who really end up suffering the consequences.
Absolutely. It's a sophisticated fraud.
It's a sophisticated fraud. It really is.
It's not. It's very, very smart, and it's matched by sophisticated propaganda and gaslighting. Do you know what I mean? And
there's a famous Voltaire quote. I think it's like something along the lines of like, inflation is like the most wicked tax, because it's like it's so nobody has any idea it's even happening. It's done so secretly and so overtly.
I mean, Keynes said that, and Lenin actually originally, I think, said that, the easiest way to overthrow society is to appreciate the currency. I mean, Daniel Webster said it, it's quoted in the book. He said,
I've got a lot of your quotes.
Yeah, he said, inflation is, gets the sweat off the brow of the working man and enriches the wealthy. I mean, the fact of the matter is that an inflationary system is by definition a system that is set up to help those in power because they can figure out a way to benefit from inflation, and everybody else pays for it.
It's just
it's just that simple, But sadly, I mean, and that's why, again, I tried to make the book easy to read because, the person who's working 3 jobs
has no idea.
Yeah, they have no, they don't have any idea. They don't understand it. They don't necessarily have the time to study it. They're not going to read The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's 500 pages. I mean, et cetera. So I've got this book and this audio book that, look, take the time to read this and you'll see that it's pretty straightforward. And the fix is pretty straightforward too. If we return to sound money, life will get a lot better for everybody, and we can return to the promise of what America once was, which is a fair system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You mentioned the fourth turning. You want to unpack that and explain to our listeners?
Yeah, sure.
Great
sure.
book by
Howard Strauss wrote this a long time ago. Just quickly, and most people listening probably already know this, but these guys are social scientists who studied societal trends. And what they posit, and I think have shown historically, looking backwards, is that societies go through major rule changes every kind of 80 or 90 years. The basis on which society is run changes, and then it divides up. In those 80-year periods, you can divide them up into 4 20-year periods. Each was a generation. And the young, the new generation, the hero generation that solves the problem. And then, of course, you have the other 2 middle and the senior generation. But the long story short is that a crisis occurs and all the rules change. And so let's take just as an example in the United States. The last fourth turning was the Depression and World War II. The world looked a certain way before the Depression and World War II. It looked a different way after the Depression and World War II. The one prior to that, and that was roughly 80 years ago, now more so, a little over 80 years ago. The one before that was the Civil War. So America was a certain way before the Civil War. America was a different country after the Civil War. Before that, the fourth turning, and interesting, that's 1865. The other one was 1776. So again, kind of 80 or 90 years prior, the American Revolution, right? Where, the states are living and they're part of the, the colonies of Britain, and they've got the crown as the master political entity. And, they get slapped with some taxes and putting up, soldiers in their homes. And they're like, hey, this sucks. We're not doing this. Fuck you. We can rule ourselves. And so, we fought a war over it and we became an independent nation. And so each, and the generation that goes through it, your generation is the hero generation that fixes the problem. But right now we're right in the heat of the problem. The problem, and this fourth turning, in my opinion, is about what the banking system and what we're going to call money. It's Robert Breedlove's, well-titled series, What is Money, is the issue of this fourth turning. And it's occurred because the Keynesian model, and to define that, John Maynard Keynes was an economist in the 30s who set up the model that said that governments should deficit spend and print money in order to keep economies humming. And kindle animal spirits is what he said.
Animal spirits. That's
right. And so
I read this stuff. I'm like, what the?
Who says that shit? He really said that shit.
I know, it's just kind of crazy.
Yeah. And
what was the famous quote he said? In the long run, we're all dead.
Yeah. In the long run.
What about the consequences? In the long run, what happens in the long run? In the long run, we're all dead.
Yeah, which is a totally evil thing to say. That's like saying I don't give a shit about my kids. I mean, we can enact good policies, and if they don't, somebody said, but sir, in the long run, that won't be a good policy. It doesn't matter. In the long run, we're all dead. Well, no, you're not. Your kids are around. And of course, he didn't have any kids, so it didn't matter to him. But
yeah.
But the point is that this Keynesian system that we have of more debt, more spending, et cetera, has reached its natural endpoint because the debt now is so excessive. The money printing is so excessive. The inflation is bad, and in my opinion, only going to get worse. And therefore, this system will break down. And just out of necessity, we will have to return to sound money. So the book was written in part to educate people about that process and what's happening, to tell them how to protect themselves. And then also it's kind of a political cry because at some point in the next 5 to 10 years, this issue is going to get bigger and uglier. And how long we have to suffer from it and how we deal with it are going to be impacted by who we vote for.
Mhm.
And I suspect what will happen is some more sound money politicians will arise. People like Lummis, people like RFK, et cetera. And we will return to a sound money system,
Yeah.
and our world will get better.
So I think it was Hayek that said, I want to say it was Hayek that was talking to Keynes and kind of said, like, the one thing you're not thinking about in your models is, because Keynes essentially said, hey, when economies are good, we'll stop the spending, right?
Correct.
But Hayek was like, no, that's never going to happen, right? There's like, who's going to want to stop the spending, because it's an easy Band-Aid to patch over any problem. And Hayek was absolutely proven right if you look at history.
Of course. To defend Keynes, he did say, we deficit spend in slow times, and then of course you run surpluses and cut back in rich times. And Hayek called him out on it.
This is never going to
That's
happen.
not going to happen.
It's just human nature. You're not accounting for human nature.
Yeah. They will never cut back.
So I hope you're right that we're going to get some sound money politicians, and we certainly have some that are kind of, on the periphery. But again, when you get in power and there's a problem, it's like, everything goes out the window.
We got a long way to go.
Yeah, we got a long way to go. So I got two questions about this. My first question is, I know you've mentioned Ray Dalio a lot in your book. Have you read his long-term cycle theory?
All of it.
Do you think this is very similar to the fourth turning? It's a part of all that?
Absolutely.
Do you think that's like...
Ray's work is great. In fact, I just sent him a book. I hope he reads it. I don't know if he will or not. I sent his whole team.
We'll tag him on this podcast. Read the book, Ray.
Yeah, I sent his whole team books, actually, all the top guys, because one of my friends used to work at Bridgewater. But he does a brilliant job of talking really about the same thing. He totally understands it. He understands the role of gold. He's actually become a Bitcoiner now, as you've probably noticed.
Yeah, he's definitely.
He understands that Bitcoin is digital gold, and so
I've watched him.
Yeah, like so many, he's kind of getting it. Yeah. But yes, it's the same thing, and these cycles are repeating, and honestly, that's one of the mistakes I think a lot of investors, investment advisors who we were talking about earlier, and others make is, in looking at things, they don't look at history far enough back. They don't understand the multi-decade and multi-century kind of trends that take place. One of the ones I think everyone's missing right now is that from 1980 till 2020, we really had kind of a deflationary trend based on a lot of things, based on technology, based on the internet, based on China price. There were a lot of things working in the favor of deflation.
We still have that, I think, with AI. I think that's still there. That headwind's still there.
Jeff points out, in fact, the deflation the technology advancement is accelerating and making the deflation worse. Jeff's brilliant point, as his book points out, is that, it's impossible to run a credit-based monetary system that has to expand in a deflationary world.
Yeah.
Because the only way to do that is to print the money to make up the difference.
I'm actually hoping to have Jeff on right after your series to really hammer all this home.
Yeah.
I wanted to get you in first because it just kind of sets it up, and then he can...
He's a good friend, and he's brilliant. Yeah. And he will do a very nice job of...
We're just trying to find the right dates because he's got to travel. And
he's great. And he will do a very nice job of taking through that. And I relied heavily on his book in writing mine. Again, this book is not... Like, I didn't have any brilliant insights here, I don't think.
I think you do.
Well,
here's
what I...
Hold on, let me just say this. This is a brilliant insight right here. I believe that we are in the midst of another fourth turning, and the problem we must resolve is, what is money? Well, that's a fucking brilliant insight.
Maybe not. Well, whatever. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is what I think. Here's where I will.
I got to follow up on that too.
Yeah, here's where I will pat myself on the back. What I think I did was I pulled together a lot of ideas in a way that's very understandable for anybody.
Yes.
And that's and that's what I'm good at, right? And so I thought to myself, and that's why I wrote the book. I thought, you know what? Nobody's really done this in a way that you could give it to anybody. Anybody. You don't have to, you don't have to have a college degree. It doesn't matter. You could just read this book and go, oh, I see what's going on. I now understand why my groceries cost more. I understand how the system is set up to make that happen. It's not greedy corporations. It's not what what Elizabeth Warren is telling us, right? It's a system that's set up that way. It's working as intended for them because they get rich, you know, and not for us because we pay the price, So
my follow-up question here is based on your insight here, this fourth turning, and our hero generation needs to resolve this. We discussed all the previous fourth turnings, right? We've got the Revolutionary War, we've got the Civil War, we've got the World Wars. Is this time, are we going to have another war? Or is Bitcoin this peaceful opt-out of the system that prevents war? What do you think about that?
Look, actually, and I want you to ask Jeff this when you get him on.
I will for sure.
Yeah, I want you to ask him because we differ on this. I think he's afraid we'll have a kinetic war. I'm not sure of that, but I've heard him say that in the past. just because, humans are humans and, you have the weapons, you're going to use them. I'm more optimistic, perhaps naively so, but I'm more optimistic that I think when we used the nuclear bombs at the end of World War II, which in my opinion, by the way, was a war crime, but that's an aside. When we used the nuclear bombs at World War II, I think what we did was we informed the entire world that it is possible to destroy the human race. And I think that got pretty well deeply ingrained in everybody. And I don't think anyone's going to ever use a nuclear weapon.
I hope you're right. I really do. I mean,
unless you got a total madman, there's no rational person that would think about doing it, knowing that it would destroy the world. I mean,
it really would. I mean,
it would.
Weapons have gotten even more advanced since then.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen all the simulations. They've seen all the simulations. We all know it would.
I think it's like 30 nukes and the whole world's done. It goes in the atmosphere and you can't see the sun. I mean, it's like game over.
Yeah,
it's like we're all done. This whole this pale blue dot that
right.
Have you ever watched the Carl Sagan video, The Pale Blue Dot?
Yeah.
Oh, it's such a great video.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. I think I really believe that absent kind of the bad person getting a hold of one and maybe I mean, look, honestly, if I were president, or the notion if anyone were nuclear attacked, I would say don't respond. I mean, just in other words, it's nuts. The whole notion that we can fight a nuclear war and have the world continue to exist, it's just not realistic. And so I actually think we might get through this without a kinetic war. I should say a kinetic world-ending nuclear war. It doesn't mean there aren't going to continue to be these proxy war skirmishes.
Yeah,
at the margin.
I really hope that ends. I mean, but
like as an example, I mean, I look at like Taiwan, right? I mean, there could be a war surrounding Taiwan, but would it go nuclear? Not necessarily.
I would be. Taiwan should have nukes. I'm surprised that if they don't, I think that's all that needs to be said to stop that war is we slip them 5 nukes, and it's like, hey, you want to attack us? We got 5 nukes. Don't do it.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't go in that direction. I think what we should be working towards is just worldwide nuclear disarmament, and I think there are a lot of rational people in the world that would like to work in that direction. But
I mean, it's like kind of saying like everyone, all the good guys, put away your guns, right? Like the way I think about it is like idealistically, I agree with you, but rationally and the game theory just doesn't. It's like
but if it's a game that nobody can win, why should anybody want to have them? I mean, the guns are different. I mean,
yeah, it feels the same. It feels like every country should just have a nuke, and then we all respect each other. It's like, hey, we can end you, you can end us. Let's
maybe.
I just think it's game theoretical because look at the countries that are being invaded. Right, where are all the proxy wars happening? The countries that don't have nukes.
They don't have nukes. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, all that's open for debate, and it's geopolitical theory is not something I think a lot about, but I believe though that we can go through this fourth turning without having a nuclear war, and I believe we can go through it without having a major war. I think that there will be significant changes coming out of this. I mean, I'm not sure that the nation states will look exactly as they look now. I'm not sure that.
Have you read The Sovereign Individual?
Yeah.
Oh, it's one of my favorite books.
Me too. I mean, I think
such a great book.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I think currencies will clearly not look the way they look now.
Yeah.
But I think what's going on, I mean, to me, the internet, Bitcoin, the decentralization that we're seeing, it's kind of destroying the need for these big centralized sclerotic things called governments. I mean, if I look at the federal government, what do I want First of all, do we even need a federal government? Couldn't we have 50 state governments?
I think that, honestly, Larry, that you say that, like I have more affinity to the state of Florida than I feel like I do to all the crazy stuff happening in the United States. It's like, I feel like I'm a Floridian. I mean, I know I'm American, but it's like,
right.
If Florida succeeded, like I would be, and I didn't have to pay fucking 40% of my income to the federal government for them to buy bombs and weapons and do all this crazy shit that's happening. All these USAID scams and everything. It's like, I would gladly just say, hey, I'll be a Floridian and I'm good. And I'm 0% state income tax and we pay property taxes and we pay our sales tax and that's that, right?
Right.
Like,
I mean, the theory is you need a national government for national defense.
For defense, yeah.
But if you can kind of de-arm the world and national defense doesn't become an issue, then what does the federal government really do? I mean, and I've talked about this a lot, and Doug Casey, I think, was the originator of these ideas. I mean, my view is the government should just be a fair referee.
Yeah.
And I want a government that runs courts and has a police force. So I want psychopaths to go to jail.
Protect property rights.
Yeah, and I want people who cheat to be, locked up and put in jail, and I want courts to enforce the rules. So, and my sense is that we could do that for like, 10% VAT.
That's pretty much the conclusion, and that's why the tithe historically through history has been like 10%, right? 10 fingers, 10% people pay it.
If somebody told me, or you got everything you do, you got to give 10% for the common good to make sure that the roads are working and that we have courts,
I think people wouldn't complain about that.
I'd be like, that's great.
That's fine.
Sign me up.
It sucks, but I'm willing to do it. People would just, we would just not.
It doesn't matter if you're rich or you're poor. It's 10% straight across the board.
I love it.
Right. And so, but maybe that's where we'll go. Right. But, they inserted themselves into all these other areas.
It's unbelievable. Right. History is like, I just got done doing my series with Dominic Frisby on his book, Daylight Robbery, which is the story of the history of taxation. And, I'm super proud of how the series turned out. And like,
he's great.
You go through history and look at how taxing different civilizations taxed and did things. And, you kind of come to the conclusion of pretty much what you just said at the end. I mean, it's kind of like this very minimal, just fair, like that's it is probably the ideal solution. And when governments and these things bloat and grow, and this happened, 6,000 years ago, the same way in ancient Sumer, and they're writing some of the things about this in ancient documents that you read. It's like the same thing is happening now. You go through the Middle Ages and, even the Islamic caliphates, and they're writing the same things when the governments grew too big. And it's kind of like these fourth turnings, these cycles.
It's a problem. Yeah. It's just a problem. But it's tricky, but it could be a solvable problem, in my opinion.
Do you see Bitcoin as the game theory behind Bitcoin and how it's this peaceful kind of digital property where it kind of takes away certain incentives? Like if you look at like a lot of the world wars, it's all about, stealing items, property, gold especially is a big one with Hitler trying to go after all the gold reserves. Yeah. With Bitcoin, it kind of like, it's not even possible. Like if you do all this war, like it's not like you can get the gold to pay for it anymore. Yeah. It's kind of like this.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, so Bitcoin basically makes war pointless. Because, it's in the past, wars were fought over property and, and territories, and ideologies, but, and Bitcoin is neutral in terms of its ideology and its property that can't be swiped. So yeah. And more importantly, I mean, as we've all discussed and we know, the inflation we suffer, a piece of the inflation we suffer is because governments could never go to the populations and say, I'm going to tax the shit out of you and conduct a war, because the population would say, well, we don't want the war. And so what they do instead is they say, we're going to have a war and, we're going to tax the shit out of you, but we're going to hide it.
We're going to hide it. You're never going to know.
You're not going to realize it until the money's worth less.
Which takes us to the fundamental thesis of your book. So I can read it. The greatest issue of our time is the broken monetary system, which leads to enormous wealth inequality because it gives one group of citizens an unfair advantage.
Right.
It also grants undue power to the government, which has led to a lot of bad policies, including perpetual wars, which is what we see. I mean, every war has been, a degradation of sound money to fund, keep it going, make it worse.
It started in World War I. I mean, we weren't going to enter it, then we did enter it. I mean, the price level in the United States in World War I doubled. It had all kinds of bad repercussions. I mean, lynchings went up. There was a huge, huge inflation. Ponzi ran his scheme. The Chicago Black Sox was 1919. I mean, the World War I inflation was very devastating to this country, and every other war has been similar. So,
I want to read another segment from your thesis because I have a lot of friends that are like more left leaning, younger. I mean, I'm early 30s, so still have a lot of friends that have very left-leaning perspectives. They feel like they've been, So, which is what I tell them, which is important. So you wrote here, young folks, socialists, progressives, and others complain that capitalism is flawed and broken. But in fact, we do not operate in a capitalist system, which is what I tell them. We only have this is an interesting word. Simulacrum. Simulacrum. Which means imitation of a capitalist system.
That's right. Yeah.
Our system is better described as Keynesian state capitalism, or my favorite, crony capitalism, which is what it really is.
Yeah.
And it is all driven and supported by the monetary system composed of fiat money, Keynesian thought patterns, and inflation. We have built our financial system on a bedrock of sand, not sound money. Yep. It is collapsing.
That's exactly right. That's what's going on. I mean, look, I get the Bernies and the AOCs. I get what they're angry about. I get that, they correctly identify that there are parts of the system that are incredibly unfair. but they shouldn't be railing per se against the billionaires. I mean, if a billionaire created real value and earned that money honestly, that's okay. What they should be railing about is the monetary system that allowed the quintillionaires, and those are the people who basically can borrow money cheap and get yield, to exist.
I saw later on in the book you had to talk about, or you mentioned how Bernie's actually on one of the committees with Rand Paul about with the Fed to like supervise the Fed. So I feel like they kind of know there's a problem, but their solution is like not the solution.
Exactly.
Like it just makes it 10 times worse.
They don't understand the core. I mean,
exactly.
They think they can tax their way out of it, and that's not going to solve it.
Yeah, it's just a delusional, which if you study history, it obviously shows you this is impossible.
Yeah.
And then a big component of the book too is this idea of the price of money is set by a banking cartel, the Federal Reserve.
Yep.
Our founding fathers would be appalled.
They would. They really would. I mean, the Constitution says that money should be gold and silver, and that's because they had experience with fiat money. They had experience with hyperinflation because the Continental, which was used to finance the Revolutionary War, hyperinflated. And so, they knew. I mean, there's some great quotes in the book about all the fraud that comes from paper money, and it actually kind of reminds me of the crypto space, right? I mean, all these cryptocurrencies are frauds, ex-Bitcoin, and so as a result. Basically, they said in the Constitution only gold and silver can be money, and knowing that that with gold and silver being money and the supply at the time being limited, it grew but limited growth, interest rates would get set correctly based on the sound money underneath it. So
it's it was like a crime where they would execute you if you tried to like do all this funny money business they're doing now. It was like they definitely understood history and knew that.
Yeah, I mean they didn't. I don't think they ever actually executed them, but there were laws, there were statutes on the books in that time frame where counterfeiting money was punishable by death. Which actually there's a great line in there from Edward Griffin in The Creature of Jekyll Island says. If that law were enforced today, do you remember this? The Senate, the Congress, the Treasury Department, and the presidency would all be facing the death penalty because they all counterfeit money in the Federal Reserve.
It's so crazy to me that we don't have any kind of group board that sets the price of eggs or gas, or we understand intuitively how fucking ridiculous that is, right?
Right.
Like everyone's like, we know that doesn't work. We know how ridiculous that is.
Right.
Yet for the most important good in all of society, money itself, we believe that for money itself, that needs to happen. Like to me, that is just, it blows my mind. It's so absurd.
It's such a disconnect, right? I mean, it's like, Judy Shelton does a great job of laying that out, how, in Russia, they set the price of grain. I mean, and they had all kinds of, famine because they set it too low. I mean, yes, everything for a society to work, for markets to work, for capitalism to work, the prices need to be set in a free market environment. Well, the price of money should be set by the free market, and it should be a balance between savers who have excess money and investment projects which need capital to try to grow. And so the two should meet in the middle and say, this is the right interest rate. That's how the interest rate should be set. Instead, we've got this group of 12 people in DC who sit at the Fed board. And, when things are really, really tough and the money's losing value quickly, like when Volcker was in office, he sets the rate at 20% and, almost puts my father out of business. Or when things are really tough the other direction and the whole thing's collapsing, they set the rates at 0%. And, the chairman of Morgan Stanley's wife gets to borrow $220 million non-recourse. Remember that story?
Well, I mean, you look at some of the USAID stuff they're finding now.
Right.
It's like,
it's just
these judges that are like blocking this stuff. It's like their wife is in the NGO. She's getting $2 million. It's like their daughter's on this one.
Yeah.
It's like such a conflict. I mean, how do these people still have they're not disbarred?
Well,
they should be like, they're like all in prison. I mean, this is insane.
It is insane. They're all pigs at the trough. I mean, the other thing that I think really, it justifies an investigation is, look at the Congress and look at the Senate, and they all come there, and some come there and they're wealthy already, but most come there and they're not particularly wealthy when they get there, and their salaries are like a couple $100,000 a year.
It's insane.
And if the longer they've been there,
it's like the more wealthy they get.
The more wealthy they get. Now, how does that happen? There's only one way. They're getting bribed, right?
Bribes, fraud, inside information,
investment opportunities.
It's just unbelievable. It's so obvious too. It's just crazy. I love this quote you have here from Gladiator. What we do in this life echoes in eternity. General Maximus. Such a great movie.
That is a good movie. That's one of my favorites.
The fundamental thesis: fix the money, fix the world. Let's talk a little bit about your story, because I really thought this was cool how you put this in here, and you kind of talked about your life and what happened, and how this stuff has affected you and your generations of your family right throughout time. What do you want to unpack that a little bit? Talk about.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just thought it was helpful to, again, people are going to read books where they hear about real people and they hear about real stories. And as I was examining the whole monetary system and thinking about it, I was really struck by how the Federal Reserve and our broken monetary system had actually impacted my family 3 times. The first was with my grandfather, who was a shopkeeper, store owner in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in the furniture business. In the early 20s, got all the wrong signals because they blew a bubble, and he borrowed money and expanded his business, only to have that bubble burst. And he spent the next 10 years begging the bank to stay in business. And,
Oh, man.
Yeah, and it really scarred my grandmother. I mean, on her deathbed, she was talking about how they don't have any debt. They don't have any debt. I mean, it was a horrible experience for them. And so, again, and this was right after the Fed had been created. The Fed was created in 1913, and here we are. They immediately went and financed the war, and then they immediately blew a bubble after the war. So that's instance one.
I can't remember if it was on Mises or Hayek that basically was predicted and said, hey, like, you do this, like, you're trying to smooth out these little boom and busts.
You're going to make it worse.
You're going to have a major catastrophe on your hands here. Like, you're really going to miss a line.
I think it was von Mises.
Was it von Mises? Because I think Hayek was still pretty young at the time. But he literally said that, hey, you're going to create the mother of all bubbles. And then,
and they did.
Sure enough, they did. It was like, just like he predicted. It was like, the roaring 20s and just totally misalignment of the signals to the market, and just boom, the bubble of all bubbles.
Yeah.
Great Depression.
And then, much later than that, in 79, 80. We went off the gold standard 71, which is a big crime. And, of course, we didn't have to do that, but we did. Nixon did. And that led to a lot of inflation in the 70s. In order to tame that, Volcker took interest rates at 20%, right? Well, my father, running the same business, had, a couple $1 million of furniture inventory sitting in his warehouses and had to pay 20% interest rates on it, and almost bankrupted him. So,
wow.
And I remember it very clearly. I mean, I remember eating tuna fish sandwiches because, times were tight, right? I mean, we weren't doing very well. And I remember the stress that he was under, the fear that he felt and our family felt. And so it was that. And then the final time was not nearly as bad because I was doing fine, but it was what cemented in my mind the notion that this thing is really broken.
Really rigged, yeah.
And rigged against us was
the short selling stuff.
Yeah. So it's 2008 and I've got the Michael Burry trade on. Michael Burry is the guy from The Big Short, who understood the housing bubble was there. I did.
You just knew how corrupted bad it was.
Yeah, I did too.
This is going to pop.
I did too, and I knew it was going to pop. I didn't even know what a CDS was. I mean, he obviously found a much more highly levered way to play it and made a lot of money doing so. I was just running an investment fund. I was like, these things are overvalued, so I'm going to short them. And I shorted all the financials. Lehman, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, Ambac, AIG, all of them, and countrywide. And the GFC hit, and right in the middle of it, the SEC came out and they changed the rules. They said, you can't short these stocks anymore.
So what happened?
Like, I had to cover within two. Like, my broker called me and said, you got to cover the stocks. Well, as you might imagine, they were all up 20% in or more in like the space of 3 or 4 days. And so I went into that. Going into that, I had a huge profit going for the year because I had been right into early September, and I was forced out of those positions. And I ended up the year down like 6%.
That's insane.
Yeah, because they changed the rules. And so this was, once again, I mean, the bankers got bailed out, and me, who was just an investor trying to play honestly by the rules, they changed the rules on me.
Yeah, to protect the people who were committing massive incompetence and fraud.
Exactly.
Shit, to protect scamming.
To protect all of them.
Yeah.
The system. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so, as you can imagine, that really was a seminal moment for me in my mind. I mean, at that point, I took the gloves off. It was like, okay, I mean, I come from the Midwest. I mean, the notion of not liking my government or going against my government, or I mean, don't get me wrong, because I'd read all the Kennedy stuff, so I understood that my government had some real corruption in it. But in general, I still kind of believed in the system up until 2008 in general. And that was just like the scales falling from my eyes. I was like, okay, I get it. This is totally rigged. All right, no mercy.
I'm going to close out our first episode with a quote from your book.
Yeah.
Play by the rules and you still lose. Millions of other Americans have received the same message.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Sad.
We'll stop off here and we'll come back with our second episode.